Hi, my name is Alan Garber, Rabbi Alan Garber, and together with my wife, Tanya, we are the rabbinical couple in Shenley. We've been here for 7 years, and I'm really excited today to share with you half an hour of Torah. In a moment, I'm going to share with you my screen. I'm going to be going through three things with you today. Number one, I'm going to be going through the sedra summary of this week's exciting sedra of Vayigash. And then I've got 5 short divrei Torah to share with you based on this week's sedra, which you can share around your Shabbat table and with friends and with family. And these ideas are actually available on a PowerPoint presentation, which I'm going to show you. You're going to be able to have access to this PowerPoint so you can actually see the divrei Torah. I'm also going to be sharing with you at the very end a couple of ideas about the fast day, which is coming up tomorrow. So without further ado, let me just share my screen with you. And you'll be able to see a little PowerPoint, which I'll take you through the sedra. So, okay, here we go. So there we go. This is me. I'm Rabbi Alan Garber, and we're going to be looking at the sedra day of Vayigash. Now, Vayigash means, and he, in this case, be Yehuda, approached Yosef, who was the ruler of Egypt. At this point, Joseph has not revealed himself to the rest of his family. But in this week's sedra, we'll see in a few moments that Joseph comes to a point where he now knows it's time to reveal himself to his family. So the word Vayigash means to approach, and in fact the sedra is all about approaching. We have lots of meetings in this week's sedra, as we'll see in a moment. So let's go through the sedra summary. In fact, the sedra finishes off on a cliffhanger. It brings together the climax and conclusion of the story of Joseph and his brothers. Now, last week we left it with Judah was pleading on behalf of his brother Benjamin. Jacob had reluctantly now allowed the youngest brother Benjamin to go down to Egypt with the other brothers. As they were leaving to return to the land of Canaan, the silver goblet belonging to this Egyptian prime minister, which was Joseph, was found in Benjamin's sack, and the brothers were forced back to Egypt to the Egyptian ruler. So this now, Judah makes a very passionate plea. He puts himself forward to argue for the release of Benjamin, arguing that their father Jacob would die if they would not return with Benjamin. So this is the encounter. And Joseph sees, he's so moved by the speech by Yehuda that Joseph cannot hold his emotions back any longer, and he commands all his courtiers to leave the room. And one of the features we see of Joseph is this power to remain in control. And even at the moment, his emotions are so stirred up by Yehuda's plea to him. But nevertheless, Joseph has in himself the inner power to ask for his servants to leave the room as he reveals himself to the brothers, so his brothers are not embarrassed by this revelation. It is only then that Joseph reveals the identity of the brothers. All the brothers embrace, and then we have an amazing description, which we'll show you in a minute, when Joseph and Benjamin, they embrace and they cry on each other's neck or necks, as we'll see in a minute. Next, Joseph comforts his brothers, saying that the whole thing was a divine plan, that he was sold as a slave to Egypt, and that had finally attained this special position as the prime minister of Egypt in order to provide for and look after his family. Joseph then instructs his brothers to return home and to tell their father the news that their son Joseph is still alive, and then the whole family would come down to Egypt. The brothers realized, though, that if they would tell Jacob, who at this time was an old man, and he might have a tremendous shock if he found out the news that Joseph is still alive. So the Midrash tells us that one of the granddaughters, Serach, the daughter of Asher, and they organized her to play music, and they subtly conveyed the message over to Jacob in order that they hear this wonderful news that Joseph was still alive. Okay, now before Jacob leaves for going down to Egypt, God appears to Jacob and promises to look after him and his family during this exile down to Egypt. And then we have a list of the 70 souls from Jacob's family, which are children and grandchildren, plus Joseph and his family who are already in Egypt, who are now sojourning in Egypt. And they make their way down. Now, at the end of the sedra, we have the emotional reunion of Joseph and Jacob. They're reunited after 22 years of being apart, and these 22 years also correspond to the number of years that Jacob was away from his father Isaac in the previous generation. Jacob is then introduced, and we have another encounter. As we said at the beginning, this sedra is all about approaching, which is the word Vayigash, to come together. And Jacob and Pharaoh. Jacob is the spiritual leader of the world, and Pharaoh is the physical leader of the world at that time. We have this amazing encounter, and Jacob gives Pharaoh a special blessing. And with this blessing, this famine, which was meant to last for 7 years, it now ends after 2 years. So as soon as Jacob arrives in the land of Israel, in the land of Egypt, the famine now ends. And this is the embrace of Joseph and Jacob. Now, at the very end of the sedra, Joseph's family settles in the land of Goshen. I put here my notes. It's very interesting to notice that the word Goshen is from the same Hebrew word as Vayigash, to approach, to come together. And when they arrive in Goshen, the first thing that Jacob insists that's set up through his son Judah is a house of study. And this has been a tremendous model for us as we set up our communities. Finally, the sedra finishes with the going back in time. So even though we have a description of Joseph, the encounter of Joseph and Jacob actually ending the famine, the sedra goes back to talk about how Joseph managed the economy in the initial 2 years of the famine, and that is the sedra summary. So now I'm going to present to you. I'm going to say basically 5 ideas, which again you can share with your friends and family around the Shabbat table. They're available on this PowerPoint, which you should have access to. So the first idea I want to share with you is the first few words of the sedra. It's a beautiful idea, and it's based on the attitude of gratitude. The sedra starts as follows: Vayigash elav Yehuda, and Yehuda, the brother who took responsibility to plead for Benjamin and to take him back to his father, he approaches him. In this case, him is Joseph, the leader of Egypt, the prime minister who they're standing in front of, this awesome figure. Vayigash elav Yehuda. Now, the Svat Emet, one of the Gera Rebbes, and he says a very novel translation, Vayigash elav. Now, the word elav here means to him. So though we know and we still appreciate it means to Joseph, but he has what they call a drasha. We learn out Vayigash elav, to approach him. How do you approach him with a capital H, i.e. God? It's through the concept of Yehuda. What does Yehuda mean? The word Yehuda, it means to be grateful. Todah. It means to be thankful. Modim means to be is thankful. Vayigash elav Yehuda. How do we approach? How do we come close to the Almighty? We come close to him through the character trait of gratitude, the attitude of gratitude. And this is entrenched in our being. The fact of the way we call ourselves as Jews in Hebrew is Yehudim. Yehudim means those that thank. And this is our very nature. As we know, if we want to understand a concept, to understand anything, what it means, we look into the Hebrew. The Hebrew describes us as the Jews, our people who are grateful. There's often a joke that, when we go to the restaurants, the Jews often complain and moan, but, that they say that, when they go to a Jewish restaurant, they say, is anything all right with the food? But we know, in essence, joking aside, that's the essence of a Jew is to be grateful. And when we can do that, see all the blessings that we have in our life, therefore we can get close to Hashem. Okay, that's the first idea coming from the first 3 words of the sedra. Let's move on to something else. And that's a message from the musical notes. This is we know that when we read the Torah portion in Shul, that is not just read out as a bland text. There's something called Ta'amei HaMikra, which is the notes that by which the Torah is recited. So each note has its special name. So on here, there's Mapach Pashta Munah Zakev Katon. So when we see this, the squiggly notes here, the person who's reading the Torah knows how to intonate the voice, and the whole purpose of it is first of all, it brings across the story, and the voice goes up and down, so it brings interest in the reading. Now, the Vilna Gaon, the genius of Vilna, lived in the 18th century. He points out that the names of the notes actually tells us a little bit of the story of this meeting between Yehuda and Yosef. And so the names of the first three notes, I'll sing it to you so you get an idea of the flavor of how it sounds, and then I'll explain to you the notes, the meaning of the names of the notes. So it goes like this: Vayigash Elav Yehuda Vayomer Bi Adoni. So the first three notes is Kadma Ve'azla Revi'i. Kadma Ve'azla Revi'i. So what does this mean? Kadma Ve'azla Revi'i. Revi'i means the fourth one. The fourth one refers to Yehuda, who was the fourth son of Jacob. Kadma Ve'azla. He got up and he came forward. So the fourth one got up, came forward, and it says Zaka Munach Segol. So the word Segol, as the expression Sugula, which means the treasured nation, refers to the treasure that Yehuda was prepared to throw away. It says Munach Zaka. He was prepared to throw away Munach, that which was Munach Segol, that which he put aside, his Sugula, his treasure, which was his place in the next world. So the Vilna Gaon points out that these six notes actually describe what was going on and what was at stake here. Kadma ve'azla revi'i, the fourth one got up and came forward, and he was willing to throw away his place in the next world in order to bring back Benjamin. So that's our second insight. Okay, let's move on to something else. This is one of my favorite ideas on the sedra, and it's something which I share with many of the people that I learn with, and that is the power which binds our souls together. So here we go. This is an idea based on the Bala Turim, a commentator on the Torah from the 13th century, and he says at the end of the first Aliyah, the verse goes as follows: Va'ata. And now, Kavoi el avdacha avi, when I, your servant, go back to our father, v'hana enenu itanu, and this young lad, Benjamin, is not with us, it's going to be disastrous. We can't go back without him. Why? V'nasho kushura b'nosho, because his soul, the soul of Benjamin, is kushura, is bound up, is tied to the soul of his father Jacob. Now, the Bala Turim points out on the gematria. So we know the gematria is a system whereby each Hebrew letter has a numerical value, and he says that the word kushura has a numerical value of 611. So what does that teach us? Well, there's another word, a very important word, which has exactly the same numerical value, and that is the word Torah. The word Torah also has a numerical value of 611. So the Bala Turim puts that back into our verse. It says, Nafsho kushura b'nasho, that his soul, the soul of Benjamin, is bound up with the soul of his father Jacob. And how is that soul bound together? It is through the Torah. The Torah is the thing which binds up souls together. It wasn't just the fact that Benjamin was the son of Jacob. They had an extra special bond. And how was that? Is because they learnt together. And the true way that we bind souls together is through the learning of the Torah. And that's what we're doing now. I mean, I can't see you over our TV screening, whether you're watching live or you're watching later on, but somehow or other, when us learning together, we are binding our souls together, because our true essence is our soul, and the things which binds us together is the Torah Kadosha, the Holy Torah, which brings all the souls together. And by the way, before we leave this Devar Torah, it's interesting to note that the gematria of Torah is, I suppose, in a way, a bit disappointingly, adds up to 611. Why is it disappointing? Because we would have thought that the gematria, the numerical value of the word Torah, it should be 613. So why is it only 611? So we know there's a verse towards the end of the Torah. It says, Torah tziva lanu Moshe, that Moses commanded us the Torah. Moses commanded us 611. The numerical value of Torah is 611. What about the other two? So we know the experience of Mount Sinai, in the sedra of Yitro, it says that the Jewish people heard the first two commandments. So based on that verse, Torah, Moshe, Moses commanded us 611. What about the other two? The other two, all the Jewish people heard on Mount Sinai. And that's where we make up the 613. Okay, let's move on to another idea. And this is a very powerful idea about reframing. And maybe as our situation, the moments in the difficult times through going into another lockdown and COVID-19, we've been battling through the challenges over the past number of months now. And one of the most powerful tools that we have in our pocket is the ability to reframe and to see the positive. And this idea comes out very strongly in the whole situation when the brothers come down and they are devastated by the revelation of Joseph. But he is able to confront and comfort his brothers with the following verse. He says as follows, Va'ata, and now, you haven't sent me down here. Ki ha'Elohim. So you might be distraught. You might have all these guilt pangs. You might feel devastated. Oh, what did we do? Are we all wrong? And how can we go forward in life? And all that guilt coming forward. But Joseph reframes it for them. Va'ata, lo'atem shalachtem osihena. It's not you that brought me down here. Ki ha'Elohim. The whole thing was a divine plan. Vaisimeni la'av laforo. And look at what God has done. He set up the whole situation that I am now in a position as the prime minister. Uladon l'kol beito, and I'm the master of Pharaoh's house. Umoshel b'chol eretz Yisrael, and I am the one who is in charge of the whole of the land of Egypt through this famine. And I'm able to provide for you and the whole world. So the whole thing is is all through divine providence. And maybe in our situation, I know it's very difficult at the moment. We've all been through difficult situations, either personally through this situation at the moment. But what the Torah is teaching us is we have the power to reframe and to see the positive in every situation. Now, we know based on the teachings of Viktor Frankl, who went through the very worst horrors of humanity. He was a Holocaust survivor, and after the Holocaust, he used his experience there to develop himself and to teach the psychology of cognitions and how we can use the power to reframe. And this is what Viktor Frankl writes. Reframing tells us that though we cannot always change the circumstances in which we find ourselves, we can change the way we see them. And this itself changes the way we feel. This was written in his famous book, Man's Search for Meaning. And many of us have heard this idea before and his teachings, but it is worth going over it and strengthening ourselves, especially in these challenging times, with the ability to reframe. Now, one of my favorite teachers who I was merited to learn with when I learned in Israel is Rabbi Zelig Pliskin. He's written numerous books on psychology and Torah and self-growth. And he develops this idea of Viktor Frankl, and he has this concept called a reframing party, which he speaks about when he's giving over talks about happiness and talks about personal growth, that we have the ability to reframe in a positive and a way any situation. So he gives an example of a dripping tap. So let's say there's a dripping tap and maybe it's in the bathroom next to where you're sleeping and it's dripping, dripping, dripping. And there's different ways that we can react to this situation. So the very neutral way is that you're not really bothered by it, it's dripping, fine. Or you can react to it by saying, oh, this is so annoying, I can't get to sleep, the dripping, I should have called a plumber, my wife should have called a plumber, somebody should have called a plumber, and be moaning and groaning about it all night, not being able to get to sleep. Or there could be a positive way of reframing the situation and actually turning it around and say, wow, this dripping, isn't it amazing? It's so meditative. every time it's dripping, I'll be able to fall asleep. The dripping is helping me to fall asleep. Again, we have an idea. There was a situation, but there are different ways of reacting to it, either in a neutral way, a negative way, or positive way. The choice is us. As Viktor Frankl says, we can't change the circumstances, but we can change the way we see these circumstances. The same with Joseph here. He was able to reframe the situation for the brothers, and they were able to see it in a much more positive light. So again, maybe this is an idea we can share around our Shabbat table, that we're all facing difficult times, but let's have a reframe party. Let's see how we can see this in a more positive light. I'll leave that for you to discuss around your Shabbat table. Let me share with you one more idea on this week's sedra before I speak about the fast of Tevet, which is coming tomorrow. And this idea is a very powerful lesson which comes out through Rashi, and it's the idea of being aware of each other's pains, and through doing so, that is the key to redemption. So here we go. This is describing the encounter of Benjamin and his brother Joseph. They are blood brothers, and their connection was very, very strong. And this is what the Torah tells us. It says as follows: "Vayipol al tzvarei Binyamin achiv vayefk." And he, referring to Joseph, fell on in the translation, on the neck, but actually tzvarei refers to the necks of Benjamin, his brother, vayefk, and he cried. Uvinyamin, what about Benjamin? And Benjamin bacha al tzvarav, and Benjamin cried on his one shoulder. So Rashi points out the grammatical discrepancy, and he says as follows: "Vayipol al suvarei Binyamin achiv vayef," that he, Joseph, cried on the necks of Benjamin, and he cried. Why are we describing necks or two necks? Surely when you cry on one neck. You can't cry on both necks. No, it says here, "Al shnei mikdashot sha'atidim liyot bechelko shel Binyamin." There was an embrace, but there was a symbolic embrace here. There was a crying, there was an embrace, but they were actually thinking about something which is going to be in the future, which was going to be the destruction of the two temples, which was going to be in Benjamin's portion. We know the temple in Jerusalem was based, it was halfway between Judah's portion and Benjamin's portion, but the actual temple itself was in Benjamin's portion. And when Joseph was crying, he was crying not just on his the physical embrace, but he was thinking about the destruction of that temple, two temples, which is going to be in Benjamin's portions, and he cried over that. What about Benjamin? The Rashi says follows: "Binyamin bacha al tzvarav," but Benjamin cried on his one shoulder. Why was that? That refers to the tabernacle, which was before we got to Jerusalem, it was a place called Shiloh, and the tabernacle in Shiloh was destroyed at one time. On Mishkan Shiloh, Yosef, and it was in the portion of Joseph, and in the end that was destroyed. So what was happening here? So when they embraced with each other, they were crying over the destructions were going to be in each other's portions. Now, there's many lessons that can be learnt from this. First of all, there's an idea that they were when they were crying, they weren't crying over each other's destruction or in their portion. They were just crying over what happened in their brother's portion. So they were thinking of each other. And I was suggesting, and this is the title here, being aware of each other's pain is the key to our redemption, or key to the redemption. When we look out of ourselves and look to care about other people, that is where we find our redemption. There is a famous. There's a story which is told, although it's not written down in Midrash, but it's often told about how God decided that the temple should be in where it was. So it tells that there's a story about two brothers, and they lose their father. One brother was not married and he was by himself. The other brother was married and had many children. And when the property came down to the two brothers, what happened was the two brothers started thinking about each other. And the brother who was all by himself thought, listen, I'm by myself, I've got plenty, I don't need to have so much food. So each night he would take food over and push it over the fence into his brother's fence. And similarly, the other brother who had a big family thought, well, listen, my brother's all by himself, and who's going to support him? So he took some of his the grain, and he, in the middle of the night, he put it over to his brother's portion of land. And this happened night after night, so that they would find food on each other's side of the fence. And one day, they actually were coming up the hill at the same time, and they pushed food over the other side of the fence. And they saw each other, and they embraced with each other. And the story goes that God decided at this very point, that's why I want the temple to be built. So we understand this in a few ways. Number one, we understand it that at the point where two people think and care for each other, that's where the divine presence is. But also the idea is that's where we find our own redemption, where we look after each other. Okay. So there are 5 ideas for you for your Shabbat table. And let me just finish off today by describing a very important day in our calendar, which is happening tomorrow, which is the fast of Tevet. It is one of the 4 fasts which marks the destruction of the temple. We have the most stringent, the most intense, which is the fast of Av. And then 3 weeks before that, we have the fast of Tammuz, which is the 17th, and we have the 3 weeks between. But we have 2 other dates in our calendar which marks the destruction of the temple, including the fast of Gedalia, which is the 3rd of Tishrei, the day after Rosh Hashanah. And then now, which is going to be tomorrow, we're going to have the fast of Tevet. And it's the shortest of the fast in terms of the actual timing. It starts at 6:15 in the morning, and it finishes at 4:44. One of the interesting features, which I'll speak about in a moment, is that usually we don't have fast days on Erev Shabbat, or if the fast was to fall on Erev Shabbat on Shabbat, it's pushed off to the Sunday. But for the fast of Tevet, it can, as it does in this year. So there's 2 things. First of all, the fast of Tevet falls on the Friday, and it falls on the secular day of Xmas Day. So this year is quite an interesting feature that it falls on Xmas Day, and so I'll speak about it in a minute. Now, what's the reason for the fast of Tevet? So there's actually 3 things. So it's a 3-in-1 fast. So for yesterday, which was the 8th of Tevet, we had the translation of the Torah into Greek. And that was the beginning. Up until that point, the Torah remained as the written Torah, that is, remained as a unique property of the Jewish people. But one of the Greek kings, Ptolemy, forced 70 of our sages into to write down or to translate the Torah into Greek. And once that happened, then our holy Torah, the written text, became available and eventually got written down in the Christian theology as what they call the Old Testament. So it was seen as a day of darkness for the Jewish people because we lost our unique connection, or the uniqueness of having the Torah for ourselves. Then on the 9th of Tevet, which is today, we have the passing of the scribe Ezra. And he was seen as such a pivotal point in our tradition. He held together when the Jewish people returned after the destruction of the first temple. He came back with Nehemiah to rebuild the temple. So it was a very sad day of his passing. That's a day, as we're so far. And then tomorrow, which is we combine it into one fast. We're going to be fasting over 3 days. It's the 10th of Tevet, the beginning of the siege of Jerusalem. And that was seen as the beginning of the end of the destruction of the first temple. That's what happened there. Now, the question is, why do we fast on a Friday? Usually, when a fast day occurs and it would fall on a Friday, we push it off. So one powerful idea, which we will finish off with, is that when something comes along, a little hint, where that something bad is coming, so the ideal thing is not to push it off. On the actual siege of Jerusalem, it said it began then. Nobody died on the actual siege, but it was the beginning of a downward path. And we often know that in life, that we need to take action. If something comes along, a little bit of a warning sign, it's not time to push it off. So that's one of the messages, that when the fast of Tevet falls on a Friday, we do not push it off to another day. We keep it on that day. Okay, let's finish off with a quick summary. We looked at the sedra, and we gave you a good overview, and we shared 5 ideas with you. First of all, the idea of coming close to God with the attitude of gratitude. And then the second idea was the message of the notes. Now, not only do we learn from the text, but there's a hint in the actual notes to the messages of the sedra. And the third idea was the power that binds our souls together is the power of the Torah, which is the special bond between Benjamin and his father, Jacob. The fourth idea we looked at was the power of reframing, which is very important, especially in the challenging times we're going through. Then the fifth idea was redemption comes by thinking of each other. And then finally, we looked at as a reminder of the fast of Tevet, which is coming up tomorrow. And when challenging times come our way, we don't push them off. We take stock of that and we do some internal work. Anyway, it's been an absolute pleasure to share with you some words of Torah. I hope that's given you some food for thoughts, some ideas, and may we all blessed with good health and happiness. And may we all strengthen ourselves in these challenging times. Thank you so much. I will end my share now, and I wish you all the best and the Shabbat Shalom.